shaft length. How does it affect speed? Pretty from a distance point of view, really, this time. So we've got two shafts here. They're same weight. It's 2 grams difference in the two setups from a shaft and a tip and a grip point of view. But as you can see from the other end, pretty significant length difference. So the one on the right here is a conventional 45-inch driver length. This is actually a long driver length. It's more like 47 and a half inches, which actually for competition play isn't legal, but for long drives it is. But it's really to help look at an exaggerated length difference, because historically people have said play longer for more club speed. Now, does that really work? If you're trying to hit the ball further and maximize distance, is a longer shaft something that's actually going to give you a benefit? So, going to have a hit with a few. This isn't my exact driver head, because this one we have on a Callaway tip, the long driver shaft. So I'm using a Callaway driver head to compare, so we can literally just switch the head over and compare the difference in shaft length, see what that does. So going to hit a few shots with the conventional length and see what we can get out of it from a speed, but also when you're playing golf, rather than just hitting balls, consistency, direction. So on tour they're willing to give up maybe a little bit of dispersion, because further the stats stay further helps, but actually for most mere mortals, big in play is far better off than spraying it all over the place. So what are the effects going to be? So what I'm going to do with the conventional one, this is my the same shaft that I use in my gamer driver, is let's try and ramp up the speed. Let's see what I can get to from a speed, but also within reason trying to keep the ball in play here. So I'm still trying to be positive with the swing, but I'm not, this isn't just a wild thrash to let it go anywhere. Well, having said that, I've just high-toed that. But start line, it stayed in play. I've got away with it. And I think this is one of the way-ups that we're going to come out of this video. What we're looking at is, if we're trying to maximize output, where is that tipping point of going too far? So let's get a few more hits here just to get a good average. So the most important thing with this, at the conventional length, I can stay balanced. Balance is the key to keeping that ball in play. If you come out of balance, then the pitch of the swing, the plane of the swing goes all over the place, and the club face starts to get out of shape. The club face gets out of shape, you hit it in the rough. So the key thing here is I can stay in control of the club head and start to build a bit of speed, start to build a little bit of distance, but without putting myself off the planet. That's a pretty good one. So fall back a little bit, but that's down the line. So not middle, but pretty good. 290, we'll take that. 107 club speed. So that gives us a good benchmark at a conventional length of 45 inches. What I'm now going to do, I'm going to switch us over to 47 and a half inches. So got the long shaft in now, so exactly the same head and same settings on this as well. So going longer, the principle is more speed. A wider arc means you can generate through, as long as the input stays the same, the wider arc means that the club head travels faster. It's why a 5-iron versus a pitch wedge travels faster. It's a longer shaft length, and some of it also is you're trying to hit the ball further, so the body naturally reacts to that. Not the case with the driver, because I'm trying to send it whichever driver I'm using. So one of the things to take into account, if I were to hold down to the conventional length, that's where I'd be stood with a conventional length driver. So if I grip to the top of this, I'm about that much further away. So I'm about 4 inches further away, which feels a heck of a long way away. I mean, it is, quite frankly, on this driver shaft, but from a setup point of view, I'm very conscious of how much further away I am from the ball. So just as a kind of in the back of my head, it feels a little unwieldy, but that's often why players don't get along with a long iron as much as a short iron, or a fairway wood as much as a hybrid. That longer shaft length plays a part in that. So we weighed them to make sure that it's not like we've gone heavier on dead weight, and that's one of the key things with this test. It's the same dead weight of club, but just on that longer shaft length. I know it is a different shaft, but you can't get shafts of this length in the conventional models. They're not designed to be installed without trimming. So there has to be a long drive shaft to get to this length. So what I'm going to try and do is try and put the same kind of swings on as I did with the conventional length, and let's see what happens from a numbers point of view. Okay, so one, really noticeably for me swinging, I don't know how visible it is, but as I start down, the longer length, the club takes longer to come with me. So I can feel myself start to spin out of it a little bit more. So, and that one actually hasn't done too badly from a dispersion point of view, but I can straight away feel that the sequencing's got to be a little bit different. So a shorter lever allows me to whip through and the club come with me a little bit more. I'm going to have to change my timing a little bit in order to get the best out of this. But what that immediately does is when the club gets behind, I've cleared out, and as the club then comes through, a little bit of separation, foot spun around a little bit more. So I'll see if I can just time that up. So it does change the swing a little bit. Yeah, trying just to knit it together, but definitely feeling a little bit more separation between me and the club. So both of these, and this is going to be different player to player in terms of which direction it goes off. I mean, that swing, from a data point of view, the path 0.0. So it's not path doing that, but the club face has got out of sync, and for me, my right side chases through and I flip it over. Others might spin out of it and send it right with the same kind of delivery. But we are seeing, club speed and ball speed are up. So there is a little bit more speed there. It hasn't yet resulted in more distance, but I also need to have a few more hits just to try and bind this together and find the timing, because it's not my natural setup. Okay, so I've waited for that a little bit longer, and that's then got a better quality of hit out of it. So I'll give it another couple, just as I'm getting tuned into the club, and this I will come back to that point in particular. But as I'm getting tuned into the club, I'm starting to find better performance. So whilst as I'm getting used to it, I'm starting to ground myself better and find more stability, still a little bit in and out of balance. I'll give this one more and then we'll have a look at the numbers. So yes, it is improving, but I'm still having to really focus on how I'm moving and how I'm swinging to keep this under control. Yeah, got a little bit underneath it. So definitely more stable as I've hit 4 or 5 shots, 5 shots there. There is a definite pattern to it. So I'm going to have a look at the data and just compare some of those results, but talk through why it's happening, but what it means to you as a player in terms of relevant to normal equipment as well. So looking at the numbers from those shots, there are some definite patterns. So what we can see, I'll go into the averages of these two here, is with the conventional length driver, with those swings, 106.4 miles an hour, with the long length driver, 108.5. Now, one could argue, am I getting more warmed up as I'm hitting? Possibly, but there is more club. So in principle, that should happen, more club speed. And as a result, ball speed got up a little bit. One of the things which is quite interesting, which I didn't expect to be quite so close, is the launch and the spins have stayed very, very stable. Now, as someone who is a very experienced player and used to swinging a lot of different clubs, I might be better at keeping my action a little bit more stable than the average player. So in terms of tuning my swing and timing, without wishing to sound, that's not me saying how great I am, that's just I'm very used to adapting my timing to swinging different options. So I've managed to get that back and deliver it consistently. However, very, very stable. I didn't expect to see it quite as similar as that from a flight point of view. So the good thing is there, if you can time the longer shaft, it doesn't necessarily change the flight profile in terms of the pitch of flight very much, or the efficiency of that flight. The bit where it does differ is in the left-right dispersion, the shot pattern. So launch and spin's very similar, ball speed's up a few miles an hour, so it is 6 or 7 yards longer across those few hits. Angle of attack is a bit more upward with the longer delivery, again a longer, wider arc. It's just I'm catching it just a little bit more on the up. Club path has stayed the same. The tolerance on the deliveries, those smaller numbers here, half a degree, that stayed very, very stable. The difference is in where the face is going. So the face to path number for the longer driver is 2.5 degrees closed on average, and it's half a degree closed on average with the conventional length driver. Tolerance-wise, pretty similar, but the pattern has changed noticeably. Now, one could argue, yes, you'll get used to that. Again, I'll come back to that. This links back into a point I was going to make earlier. When we take it to the course, the dispersion's a key thing. So this screen here, it's a consistent pattern, but it's consistently 30 yards left. Whereas the straightness, all of the other shots are maximum 16 yards offline, are within a fairway. The ones from a left-right dispersion on the long length, they're actually pretty good, but in terms of relevant to one another, but controlling that they're wanting to go left more. I'm going to have to work a lot harder to keep that online, or I've got to aim further offline. There's a lot more shot shape on average with them. So if I go back into the numbers side of things and put curve on there, we're seeing on average 7-footer curve with a conventional length. Now granted there's a little bit of bleed either side, but 7-footer curve either way with the conventional length, and 44-footer curve. So 15 yards of shot shape with the longer length, 2 to 3 yards with the shorter length. So much more stable from a ball flight point of view. So I'm not going to have to allow for that quite as much. The other aspect is that element of getting used to the longer length. It's something that whenever you change a club, there's an element of bedding in. However, what I've got to do to time that long length club, now, albeit this is an extreme type of change, but in order to make that work, I have to change the way I'm firing and swinging. I have to wait for it at the top, rather than just turn back, swing in a balanced way. With the conventional length, I can just stand, point and shoot. So we've seen it in the past when some of the pros have gone to, when the autoflex shaft came out, some of the top pros moved to it. It actually threw their timing off with other parts of the bag. There are some that it suited really well, but those that it didn't, in order to get the driver working, it threw off the 3-wood and the iron swing. Similarly speaking with this, if I work too hard to make my swing work for that long length driver, it's actually going to throw off the consistency I've got in the rest of the bag. I've got to have 2 different swings, completely different timings, which is something that one needs to be quite wary of. In an ideal world, from a club standpoint, you want to be swinging from a tempo, granted the speed's going to go up through the set, but the tempo and the rhythm of the swing, we want to try and keep as consistent as possible. That's simply not something I'd be able to do with that club versus my iron swing. So if you're having to adapt your swing too much to make one club work, then you need to consider whether that's damaging the rest of your game. So, but what we can see is, longer goes further. Yeah, in principle, yeah, longer does go a little bit further, but it also goes a little bit further offline. So weighing up what's worth it from a yardage gain, is 7 yards longer worth 15, 14 yards more offline? For me, for what I'm playing in, no. I mean, 7 yards is appealing, but to what it takes for me to achieve it, I think I give up too much from a control and a consistency standpoint, dispersion-wise and directionally, in order to achieve that versus what it's also going to do to my iron game. So longer is longer, but it's also further offline. So when trying to chase one element of performance, just be mindful that you're not negatively affecting other parts of the bag, and try and keep everything as consistent as possible from a swinging point of view. Minimise the differences you've got to make at each part of the bag, which is going to give you the best chance of getting consistent performance all the way through the set, as many rounds as possible.